What's up, everyone? It's the Home Ec Guy here, and today I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. I want to talk to you about voting. It's 2016. It's an election year. The caucus has just started, so I think a video about voting should be in order. Everyone talks about going out and voting and the importance of going out and voting. No one talks about that's more of a subjective thing. Go vote. I want to talk about the objective view of what voting is, how it works, how it doesn't work, and how our system works and how it can be manipulated. So, I have a total of 37 voters. My candidates are Trump, Cruz, Sanders, and Clinton. I combined them all together. I'll be able to explain the caucuses and hopefully the way our presidential election works using this. So what we have is I made all of my voters, all 37 of my voters, rank the people. Now they had to put first place, second place, third place, and fourth place. They couldn't allow ties. So we had 14 people that voted for Donald Trump first, Ted Cruz second, Bernie Sanders third, and Hillary Clinton fourth. 10 people that voted this way, 8 people that voted this way, etc., etc. So what we do is, now we have to count these votes. And what Arrow's theorem of impossibility says is that there's no fair way to count votes anytime there's more than 3 people involved in the vote. And that's exactly what we have going on with the caucus and exactly what they try very hard to do to avoid in the presidential elections. So in the caucus we have more than one person or more than 2 people running for president, and you can only vote for the top person. You only vote for the person you want in the position with our caucus. So you go in, you have all these choices, Trump, Cruz, Sanders, and Clinton. You only get to choose one. You don't get to rank them like I made my voters do. In the caucus, you only get to vote one way, the top way. So what that voting is called is the plurality method of voting. And the plurality method of voting is whoever gets the first place, the most first place votes wins. So if we look at our calendar or schedule over here, we have 14 people wanted Trump in first place, 11 people wanted Sanders in first place, 8 people wanted Clinton, and 4 people wanted Cruz. So, with using the method that the caucus uses, Trump wins that caucus. He won the most, he had the most first place votes. Now, this is called plurality, and it has to be defined. It's definitely different than majority. Majority would be more than half of the votes. So we have 37 voters. The majority in our vote would be 19 voters. So Trump won with 14 votes. He didn't have the majority of the votes. But what's interesting too about our voting here is since we made them rank the people, there is kind of one majority. The majority of the people, let's see, 18, 22, 23 people, that's more than 19, didn't want Trump to be president. They weren't sure who they wanted to be president, but they were sure they didn't want Trump to be president. So using the plurality method of voting, which we use for doing the caucus, Trump won even though the majority of the people didn't want him to win. They weren't sure who they wanted to win, but they didn't want him to win. So that's not really fair. And also, if one person could go head-to-head against each other person and beat them, then they should be the winner. And with the plurality method of voting, it also allows for that. The plurality method of voting, the way we count our caucuses, is very bad. Not only that, let's say originally there was 9 people that wanted Cruz to win and 9 people that wanted Trump to win. But 5 of the people over here, they really didn't want Sanders to win. So what they did is they threw their vote to Trump, so Trump won because they really didn't want Sanders to win. That would be called insincere voting. It's voting against somebody, not for somebody. In South Carolina, the caucus is very allowing of that because you're allowed to vote in both caucuses. So I can go vote in the Republican caucus for the guy that I really want to win, then I can go vote in the Democratic caucus against the person that I want to lose. So that's what the insincere voting is. Another thing the plurality method of voting is exposed to. These These are all very big things. The plurality method of voting is or counting votes, is a very bad method of counting votes, but it's what we use to determine the two candidates to run for president. So let's see what other ways there are to count votes in more than more than two people, and I'll show you how they're also not really fair and they're exposed to different kinds of things. So what if instead of just counting the first place votes, we wanted to account for everybody, so we assigned a point value to each place. If you get a first place vote, it's worth 4 points. If you get a second place vote, it's worth 3 points. Third's worth 2, and fourth is worth 1, etc. And then we count our points that way. So if we do that, in this column, Trump gets 4 points times 14, so he got 56 points. Cruz got 42 points. Sanders got 28, and Clinton got 14. So if we do this through all of these, which I'm not going to do all the math for, you can do the math at home if you want. But if you want to add up the points, and if we do add up all the points and count that same method, that's called the Borda count method of counting votes. We assign points values to every position. Whoever gets the most points, they get to win. So if we do this, and we count all the points on all of our votes here, we have a different winner than before. Trump is no longer the winner. Ted Cruz is our winner. So now we have Ted Cruz and Donald Trump as our winners, depending on how we count these votes. Now, what's wrong with the Borda count method of voting? The problem with the Borda count method of voting, assigning these points, is that it violates the majority criterion. And the majority criterion is simple. It says, hey, if you have 19 votes for the win, then you should win. You have the majority of the votes. You shouldn't lose if you have the majority of the votes. With the Borda count method, though not in this example, it is possible to have the majority of the first place votes and still lose the point count. So that's not fair. That exposes the majority criterion, which makes the counting method unfair. So moving on beyond that, we have what's called the instant runoff method. And the instant runoff method is pretty easy. We do the plurality method. We count up first place votes, and we see if there's a majority. And there's no majority in this example. So what we do is we cut off the person with the lowest amount of first place votes. In this example, Ted Cruz is our first one eliminated. He's only got 4 first place votes, and everyone slides up. So now we do the count again. Trump has 14. Sanders has 10. Or 11, I'm sorry. Hillary, now that Cruz was eliminated, these slide up. Hillary now has 12 votes. So if we move this up, Hillary has 12 votes. It's still not enough to be majority, but it's more than before. So Trump has 14, Hillary has 12, Sanders has 11, Cruz was out. Now Sanders has the least amount, so now he's out and everyone slides up. We do the recount again. If we do the recount again this time, we finally have a majority, and that majority would be everybody else, which is 23. So if we do the instant runoff method of counting, Hillary Clinton becomes the winner of this vote. So now we have a different way to count the votes. My dog Boo Boo is standing right here, of course. So we have a different way of counting the votes. We've counted them 3 different ways. We had Trump win the plurality method. We've had Cruz win the Borda count method. We've had Clinton run the instant runoff method. We have one more method left. It's the pairwise comparison method. Now, the pairwise comparison method lets us do a round-robin competition head-to-head against each person. And depending on who wins each head-to-head competition, points are assigned. So let's say Trump and Cruz go head-to-head, and Trump beats Cruz here, 14, so he would get 1 point times 14, so he would get 14 points here. But Cruz wins all the other ones to 23, so he would get all those points and would ultimately beat Trump head-to-head in a competition. If we erased everybody else and just left Cruz versus Trump, Cruz would beat Trump. So then we would do Trump versus Sanders, Trump versus Clinton, Cruz versus Sanders, Cruz versus Clinton, Trump or Sanders versus Clinton, etc. Now, if we did this, and we did round robin, head-to-head, everybody versus each other, and determined who the winner would be, we would find out that Bernie Sanders would be our winner. Bernie Sanders would win the pairwise comparison method, And again, you can try this and do the math at home if you want, but it's definitely there. You would do round robin. You would say, okay, Trump loses to Cruz. Does Trump beat Sanders? He beats him here, but nowhere else. So Sanders wins that point. So Trump's got 1 point. Nope, Trump's got 0 points. Cruz has 1 point. Sanders has 1 point. And you would count them all up this way and do a whole round robin for each person. If we count them that way, Sanders wins. So here we've shown 4 different ways to count the exact same number of votes, and depending on how we count them, we show up with different winners. And when you first explain each different one, they all kind of make sense. Oh yeah, whoever has the most first place vote wins. Yeah, sure, that makes sense, until you explain why it doesn't make sense. And then you assign points, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, assigning points, that makes sense, until it doesn't make sense. And then so you show the instant runoff, you know, okay, well we keep eliminating the bottom person until we find a winner. Oh, okay, cool, that makes sense, you know, until it doesn't make sense. And the instant runoff, I didn't explain why that doesn't make sense. And it's kind of strange. It's called the Monotonicity Criterion. And it says that if X is the winner, and in re-election the only changes favor X, then X should still be the winner. So in this example, when we do instant runoff where Clinton won, I'm going back a little bit here, but if we go with instant runoff where Clinton won, and instant runoffs where we only counted first place votes, kept eliminating the bottom person until we had a majority. So in the first round, Trump won that. And after that, the only changes were people underneath Trump that lost getting eliminated. So that shouldn't make Trump's position worse. That should only make Trump's position stronger. And in this case, it makes his position worse to the point where he ultimately loses. So that's what the monotonicity criterion is basically. You know, Trump won the first round. He didn't win the majority, but he won, you know, he was the highest vote in that round. And subsequently, when people get dropped off, that should only improve his position. Instead, it only made his position worse to the point where he lost. And that violates one of the fairness criterion that exists in counting votes. And then when we go to the, excuse me, when we go to pairwise comparison, where we went round robin, one of the problems with that is it can take a real long time to count up all the different round robins, especially if there's a bunch of different candidates to choose from. But beyond that, beyond the length of time it takes to count the votes, you get the independence of irrelevant alterations criterion, which is kind of weird. And that says that if Trump wins, and this is actually interesting because it could possibly come into play if we use this method of counting in the way that the elections are going this year, it says, okay, if Trump wins, and it turns out that Ted Cruz is Canadian and can't run, so they have to recount the votes, Trump should still win. If someone got disqualified and you're the winner, it shouldn't be like, okay, this guy got disqualified, now you lost. That's ridiculous. So if Trump won, or in this case Sanders won, let's say Sanders was the winner of the pairwise comparison vote. So Sanders won this whole thing. It comes out that Cruz is Canadian, can't run for president. Sanders should still win. But when you do pairwise comparison, it's possible that someone could get eliminated or disqualified, and in a recount, the winner could end up losing, and that's why that's not fair. So again, here's 4 basic methods of counting votes, the same exact votes that were ranked the same exact way, and getting a different winner every time. And it makes sense when each one's first explained. They make perfect sense, they seem logical, and then it's very easily shown why they're not logical and why they're not fair. And so this is how our caucus is kind of run. We use the plurality method here to do our caucus, and it's not fair. And we actually apparently we use a coin flip method now too. But the plurality method is how we do the caucus, and it's very easily manipulated, it's very easily changed, it's very easily beat, as I demonstrated here. The majority of the people here, 23 people, didn't want Trump to be president, but Trump won in this method of counting. So we need to think about what voting actually is and if it makes sense. This video is going on a little bit, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it here, and in the next video I'll explain weighted voting systems and how our presidential election actually works and how it can be manipulated as well, so that somebody with way less than the popular vote could win and become president. So I hope everybody learned something here. It's an election year. It's important to understand how voting works and how it can be counted, and really think of whether it's a system that even makes sense or works. Thanks for watching. Check back soon. I'll have a video up on how our presidential elections work.